Ladies and gentlemen, it's 1:30. We will call to order the, what are we here, November 8, 2019 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors. Ask everyone to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair West?
Yes.
Director Mobley?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Okay, next, agenda review. Any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Chair.
Thank you. All right, public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to comment or address the board on matters not otherwise on today's agenda. If you wish to be heard, please step forward, identify yourself, and do so. Hi, Steve.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Nick Valestrino. I'm representing a buyer on a 160-acre piece of property in Mopark. And effectively why I'm here is I've spent about the past 6 weeks trying to determine what we can do with the property. Give you a little background. It's 160 acres. About 88% of the property is in the outcrop area. And my buyer is simply looking to create a hobby-type farm environment. He wants to do some planting, have a handful of cattle, build a primary residence. And when I go to the planning department, fits all the criteria. It's not a problem, almost without limitation. We could have more cattle than the land than we would ever want to put out there. They're saying we could plant the whole thing. But then I realize there's other issues that come into play. One is, and primarily the water district. And that's where I've been having a hard time determining exactly what we can do or what my buyer can do with land in the outcrop area. There's effectively three key issues. Number one, can the buyer plant in the outcrop area? I have not been able to get a straight answer from anyone on that. According to planning and zoning, I'm fine, but I understand there's legislation and limitations on the percentage. At least that's my impression, what I've been told. But there's been a lot of ambiguity on whether or not we can even plant in the outcrop area. And so any direction I can be sent in to determine that would be extremely helpful. The second item is in regards to building a home. I haven't been able to get any confirmation on whether or not they can build in the. I've been told they can build in the outcrop area, but I have no idea if we can put a septic system in there or not. And since 88% of the property is in the outcrop area, we may have to run the sewer, 3/4 of a mile. So it becomes very problematic to the small little portion of the property that's not in the outcrop area. The third issue is the property currently has about 12 acres of concrete that was used for chicken coops. And that concrete is sitting in the outcrop area, which is really designated an area to absorb water. So the other question for the board is whether or not we can work some type of net zero impact by removing the concrete and replacing it with plants, with either crops or increase our water allocation as a result of doing something that will increase the absorption rate. I have a document that kind of outlines my questions and background on the property. I don't know if that's pertinent, or if I can give it to Jamie. And I think, just to speak in general, it's been a little frustrating, and I understand a lot of this is still trying to be understood and worked out. But there's a piece of land that we simply can't get a confirmation on what can be done with it. And there's not a piece of paper, there's not a guideline. For example, can we plant the outcrop area? It seems like a fairly simple question. do we have to plant it organically? Can we not fertilize? There doesn't seem to be a document anywhere that addresses those issues. And it could be I've been given the wrong information, but this is kind of my last stop in an attempt to try and figure out what the heck my client can do. Okay.
Nick, just by way of process, during public comment, the board's not allowed to engage in a discussion or
I
my
realize that.
suggestion is direct your questions to staff to the extent that they can answer them. I'm sure they'll be happy to.
Okay, staff.
And why don't you raise your hand and attack him first? That's, okay. After
Well, yeah,
after the meeting.
yeah, oh yeah.
We have your letter, so we can engage and exchange contacts and continue this further.
Right, right. My contact information is on the letter, so I'm just looking for a response back in hopefully a timely fashion. But I appreciate your help with this.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Any board member comments? Anyone?
I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Ditto, thank you. Any others? All right, moving on then to the consent agenda. There's only one item. Unless somebody has any questions or comments, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving then on to the regular agenda. Item number 2, GSP update.
Good afternoon, Chair West, members of the board. For the record, I'm Kim Loeb with Fox Canyon staff. So we're coming to the end of the very long process to develop and prepare these groundwater sustainability plans. As you know, your board opened a 60-day public comment period with the draft groundwater sustainability plans. We did receive comments. And Dudek is going to give a presentation momentarily to talk about some of the topics of the comments that we've received and how they're moving forward to address those, and then to complete the GSPs for consideration of your board to adopt them at the December 13th meeting. We did have a TAG meeting scheduled on October 31st to provide an opportunity for TAG to give Dudek and agency staff feedback on the comments received. We did not have a quorum at that TAG meeting, and not many members of the public either. It was just small, so just to inform your board of that opportunity that we had that was didn't come to fruition. And so that's about all I have to say before I ask Dr. Jill Weinberger to come up and run you through the comments in Dudek's process moving forward.
Good afternoon. I find myself yet again having to move the microphones back down. For the record, my name is Jill Weinberger. I'm with Dudek. We are the consultant that has prepared the draft GSPs, and we're in the process of finalizing those draft GSPs based on the comments that we received on the drafts. And as Kim already mentioned, we can very quickly go through the general timeline. The end of July, I believe, the drafts were released for a 60-day comment period. That closed at the end of September, and we've been spending the last 6 weeks or so reading every single comment. Comments were submitted both online and comment forms online, and then letters were submitted as well. So we've read all the comments that were submitted online as well as all the letters. And today, I'm going to be walking you through the general comment themes that were universal throughout many letters that we've read and comments that we received. If there's any direction that we need from the board today, it's either proceed moving forward to finalize the GSPs, or if something comes up in these comment themes that you would like to provide a different direction, we'd like to hear that. But as Kim said, we are trying to finalize these for the December 13th board meeting, which does not leave much time to to push back things in the schedule at this point. And the reason that we are doing that is that these are due to DWR at the end of January 2020. So that is this timeline here, and I will start this by saying yet again, this is, of course, the timeline to finalize the GSPs, which is the first step in a much longer process. And so I think that's going to be one of the things that we see come up in these comment themes. Just a brief summary of the comments. There were 30 letters that we received, 242 individual comments that were submitted on the website. As I said before, all of the comments and letters were reviewed. Certainly all of them were reviewed by DUDEC. I think all of them, most of them have also been reviewed by staff. And those GSPs are in the process, the draft GSPs are in the process of being modified in response to those comments where we can. The one thing I should clarify here, though, is that we are not preparing a CEQA-like comment response matrix. That is not required under the SIGMA regulations, and it was not something that, am I too loud?
Excuse me one second, we're just getting feedback.
Oh.
Just a little.
Let me move it away.
Matt might do it, or they can do it up on top. Let's
Okay,
see.
yeah, I apologize. So we are not preparing an individual comment response matrix. We are preparing a comment summary that all of the comments are currently on the website. All of the comments will be in the appendix and appendix to each GSP. So all of the comments will be there for DWR to read and review, all the comments on the drafts, but we're not going to have an individual response to every individual comment. Some of the comments that came up, and part of the reason we can't provide an individual response to every individual comment is some of the comments that came up are policy-related comments. I'll talk about those next. And I've mentioned the last two bullet points already. They're going to be in an appendix to the final GSPs, and they're currently available for anyone who wants to review them on the website. Those policy-related comments. I think one of the general themes in many of the comment letters was a request for a detailed, defined plan to implement on how the pumping reductions would be implemented over the next 20 years. So there's a broad, there are several broad statements, broad understanding in the GSP that ramp downs are anticipated, but people are requesting defined ramp down plan. Additionally, there were requests that the allocation plans be included in the GSPs. At the time that the draft GSPs were released, the Oxnard PV allocation plan had not been finalized. That's now final, so that'll go in the final GSP as an appendix. There were also requests that coordination agreements with other GSAs be included in the GSPs. If those come in time to put them in an appendix, we're happy to do that for the final as well. They were not available when the drafts were out. And then there were some comments discussing the regulatory authority of the board on pumping reductions. And so we will leave those policy discussions for you. Moving on to some of the more technical comment themes. Again, you'll see, I think, a lot of the requests were for additional detail. And to the degree to which we can provide that additional detail in the final GSPs, we are working to do that. But I think it's important to keep in mind that this is the first step in a long process. And so in many cases, that detail just isn't available to us right now. And so that will be identified as a data gap to be filled or a plan to be worked on after the GSPs are adopted. So a request on details of when additional monitoring wells will be installed and used to fill data gaps. That was one of the requests. Additional detail for costs, both yearly and total, that'll be spent specifically on monitoring wells. I think those are some discussions that still need to be fleshed out a little bit further before they can go in the final GSPs. comments on the numerical modeling provided by United Water Conservation District and Cayugas. There were requests, you'll see this word detailed, for additional detailed documentation of the future scenarios. I know that United has been working on it. I think I got an email this morning for some of that additional documentation. I haven't reviewed it yet, but that will be incorporated into the GSPs as an appendix. And then diverse comments on the use of modeling for evaluating the minimum thresholds, measurable objectives, sustainable yields, and seawater intrusion. Much of this was discussed at TAG. The approach was discussed at TAG and has been hashed out over several years. That's not to say that moving into the future, some of these approaches can be refined, but I think for these GSPs, we're where we need to be for the modeling. Fourth theme, we're getting. I think we're halfway through on these. Water budget clarification. This is something that we can do and we have done. So we've added additional clarification on how the sustainable yields were calculated, and we've clarified the use of the 2015 to 2017 pumping averages and surface water delivery discussion in the GSPs. So that was something that we really appreciated the comments on. We've appreciated all of the comments, but in this particular case, this was quite clear, and it was something we could help clarify for the reader. Projects and management actions. There were, again, requests for additional projects or projects similar to ones used in other basins with seawater intrusion, and that generally is a statement saying that there was a request to investigate seawater intrusion barriers, injection wells, other strategies that have been used elsewhere in Southern California. There were comments that inland and or adjacent basin pumping does not impact or affect seawater intrusion at the coast. Comments to clearly define, they were requesting a clearly defined project and implementation timing to optimize the sustainable yields and minimize pumping reductions, and also requests that the pumping reductions be further assessed for economic impact. With the projects, that again went through a long process, both with TAG and with the board, and I think was a good first step in getting people to understand the kinds of projects that were proposed for this. And now that people have read that, other project ideas have come up, and I think that those absolutely should be investigated in the future moving forward. But we're at a point that they can't be incorporated into these GSPs per the DWR regulations on what can be in these GSPs. Comment themes specific to groundwater dependent ecosystems. This gets, again, to filling in data gaps. So there were several requests that there be some additional study and filling in of data gaps with more monitoring in the GDE areas. That was proposed in the GSPs. That was recognized as a data gap, and additional wells were proposed. So then just the process of prioritizing wells and figuring out where they need to go and when they need to be installed would be what needs to happen moving forward. A request to include in-stream beneficial uses of surface water in the sustainability goals. We're working through some language that may be included in revised language in the GSPs with staff, and we're working to address that comment the best we can. And then additional characterization of the groundwater surface water interaction. Currently, this is a data gap. This is one that's been identified in the GSPs. GSPs are allowed to have data gaps so long as we tell DWR this isn't something that we know quite that well yet, and then we can plan for future studies to fill that. And then this last one, there's actually one more after this, but this one was a general comment that came up quite a bit, and we, I think, have done what we can to clarify in the GSP that this is allowed, but there were a number of concerns that groundwater elevations could not be used as a proxy for other sustainability indicators. That's just not true in the language of SGMA. It is specifically allowed, and we've tried to address that here. But as we have in the emergency regulations, it says an agency may establish a representative minimum threshold for groundwater elevation to serve as the value for multiple sustainability indicators where the agency can demonstrate that the representative value is a reasonable proxy for those other minimum thresholds. And so we've done that in the GSPs, but we'd just like to clarify that this is something that DWR will accept and I assume we'll be looking for in multiple GSPs. Groundwater elevation is one of the things we can measure and measure well. So we're going to continue to use those proxies until such time as additional data would come in that would allow us to switch to something else. And this is the last one, is that there were, across the board, there were specific requests for edits to individual sentences, language, that kind of thing. Those comments were taken on a case-by-case basis. Where we can use them to clarify something, where we can use them to help inform the reader better, we've certainly done that. What we want to try to avoid is making changes that would clarify it for one person, but muddy it for the 99% of everyone else, right? So we're looking at those on a case-by-case basis. With that is the comment summary, and I just want to say one more time, because somehow I feel like I never say it enough, this is really the first step in a much longer process, and so I think the agency is in a good place looking forward to what else they can do, and we've certainly really appreciated working on these GSPs and working with staff and working with the board. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation there.
Thank you, Joan. Any questions from the board? I just have one. Any idea when that next edition of the GSPs will be completed and available for distribution?
Meaning the revised draft. So our anticipated pencils down date, I think, is somewhere close to November 22nd, which is not very long from now. And that's when they're going to get shipped out. And so I think the board will receive them the 25th is what I'm hearing.
Will we get a red line? Or will there be one available so that instead of going through the entire text again, having done it already, we can go through and look at the changes?
I don't know the details of that. We can talk to staff about providing that maybe for the board. I don't think we anticipated providing that for public review, but.
Or an index of where the changes are, at least?
Yeah, we can work that through.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Joe. Any questions from ladies and gentlemen in the audience? All right, this is a, I guess, this is a receive and file item as well as their staff's looking for direction. I think the direction has to be, keep producing those things and get us what you can as soon as you can. Beyond that, I'm not sure that, is there anything in particular you needed further direction on? It sounds like the plan's in good place.
Chair, board members, no, just in case you had any specific direction before they complete the final draft for your consideration based on any comments that you've heard or any of those policy issues. I think much of that we've talked about quite a lot, and a lot of the aspirational stuff is the next step for studies and feasibility analyses and all that.
Okay. I guess is there a motion to receive and file the report?
Move to receive and file.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we are going to, I don't think there's any, is there an executive officer's report this time?
No, Chair.
I don't see one. Okay, we're going to suspend this meeting and move into closed session. We will return once we're done. Thank you all. Returned from closed session to report that there was no action taken in closed session that needs to be reported out. And with that, we are adjourned.